but I want to open up the floor to Dr. Chandra Aurov. Take it away.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. And I hope that I can offer you some insight. I'm actually a math educator, not a science educator, but I have certainly worked with science educators throughout my career. And I think that the things that I've learned over the past 20 something years translate well across fields. So I don't think that it's super field dependent. I'm going to share my screen. I have just a few slides to help keep me focused. And my goal is to give you enough of an introduction to my pathway that you can ask questions, because I think it's more interesting for you to ask questions than it is for me to just tell you things. So I just have a total of 5 slides, including the one you're looking at. So it's very short. First is an overview of my academic journey. I was a first generation college student. I went to the University of Alabama as an undergraduate, and my major started out being flute performance. And I switched to a program that they have there that's called New College, which is basically a liberal arts degree with a major emphasis area. So I have a focus area in computer music. And I start there because, as I have in the middle, everything eventually goes full circle. And I have found over my career that having that technology start has come back over and over again, even though I don't think of myself as a technology researcher at all. Um, from Alabama, I went to IU for graduate school. My PhD is in instructional systems technology, and I have a minor in curriculum studies from IU as well. There, I was there for 5 years working on my PhD, and I got very interested. I started out thinking I was going to do multimedia development, which was something that was huge for about, I don't know, 3 years, and then completely disappeared. Like all of you are probably like, multimedia development was a thing. Yeah, it was actually a thing. Um, but when I got to IU, what I found out I really cared about wasn't so much the technology development as it was um, I have a real interest in changing schools, and part of that comes from the fact that I was an honor student all the way through school, and I had a pretty um, mundane education. It was not inspiring in any way. Um, and when I got to graduate school and I found out all the different things that I could have experienced as a student, I got very excited about that and started thinking about how to support teachers so that more students can have the kinds of experiences that I didn't have as a student. When I graduated from IU, I took my first job at Ohio University. I was only there for a year. It was in educational technology. What drew me to Ohio University to start with is that they were at that point um, a research two institution with a really strong emphasis on both teaching and research. And I thought that that was going to be sort of ideal for me because I love research. I self-identify as a researcher first, but I'm also very passionate about teaching and I wanted to do better with my teaching. And so this seemed like a really nice fit. And the educational technology faculty seemed like a nice fit. There was a science educator on faculty who had just gotten her degree in instructional technology as well, and me, and then a third person. But it turned out that the service commitments at Ohio University at that point, again, this was more than 2 decades ago, were such that not just service teaching commitments too, were such that it was just eating all of my time and there was no time for research. I was given, I will never forget the wording, the opportunity to lead the master's research project, which is basically a small um, version of a master's thesis for 25 practicing teachers. And it was they're on a trimester, a quarter system there. So it was 2 quarters back to back. So 20 weeks of nonstop mentoring of these 25 people to get them through the program. And I got 24 of them through, but I pretty much burned myself out in the process. And I reached out to some people who I knew in the field and asked what would happen if I were to go into industry or some other kind of job, if I would ever be able to get back into a university, because I was interested in staying a researcher, but I recognized that I needed to get out of Ohio. Um, I want to put out there, I'll talk about fit in a while. This is absolutely a fit issue. There is nothing wrong with Ohio University. There's nothing wrong with the people I was working with there. It was just that I was not a good fit for where they were at that point. If I were to go there now, I think it would be a completely different experience. Um, but for who I was then and who they were then, it was just a bad fit. And so one of the people who I reached out to was Mike Hanafin, who was very well known in instructional technology. And he ran the Learning and Performance Support Lab at the University of Georgia, which was a cutting edge research lab dedicated to educational research, mostly in STEM and instructional technology. And he said, "Hey, instead of going into industry, why don't you come here and be a research scientist? I have a project management position that I'd like to put you into." And so I packed up and moved to Athens, Georgia, which is a fantastic place to live. I highly recommend, if you've never been to Athens, that you go there sometime and enjoy the food and enjoy the people and the music. And it's a really fun place to live. Um, I was a research scientist at the University of Georgia for almost 10 years. I was affiliated with two different departments, with math education and with their instructional technology department. I mentored graduate students. I managed graduate students. I had a lot of grant funding, and I had a large group of graduate students who worked for me and who I mentored. I think the biggest it was at one point was around 15 or 16 students. So it was a lot of graduate students. Um, and it was a great place to learn to be an academic because I think it still is. At the time, it was the largest school of education in the country, and I think it still is. It may not be anymore, but it is a very large school of education. People will ask me, "Well, did you know so and so?" And I'll be like, "No," and they'll look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, there were somewhere between 200 and 300 faculty when I was there. It is a huge school of education. Um, so no, I didn't know all the faculty there. But I had really close relationships with the math ed department. I had really close relationships with the science ed department. They have since merged into a single department. Um, and I was working with both departments. And that is where I became a math educator. I was working with both departments for a while, and I started to realize that this notion that you can be a generalist and work with SMEs, subject matter experts, and move your research forward that way doesn't really work in math and science education. Maybe in like a curriculum development setting it does, but not in a research setting. You have to have a fair amount of the content knowledge in order to be able to move your research forward if it's going to really be in one of those two fields. And I had a lot of momentum around math education, and I started to realize the ways that I had been cheated out of a good math education. And so that's sort of how I fell into being a math educator. And sort of faded out of science ed, even though I will say I worked a little bit towards getting funding for a project around 3D horse anatomy that was super cool with the veterinary school there. And I think they still make that product, but it was a lot of fun to be in that group for a short amount of time and to see the work that they were doing. Um, Horses have this problem where their intestines basically tie themselves up in a knot. And this was a 3D model that showed how that happened, because obviously you can't watch it happen in a live horse. You can sort of see what a healthy intestine looks like and you can see what it looks like afterwards, but this sort of showed the process. At any rate, um, so the problem that drove me away from the University of Georgia was that being research faculty, well, there was a career path. I did go up for promotion from assistant research scientist to associate research scientist. When I got my first $1 million grant, I realized that the next thing for me to do was get another $1 million grant. And I was like, well, this is kind of like being on a treadmill. And I don't know that I want to be on a treadmill. I want to have the experience that tenure track faculty have, and be able to grow in the kinds of ways that tenure track faculty can grow and work with students in those kinds of close ways. I did get to chair dissertations at Georgia, but it was really a lot of project work. There was one semester when I had 9 projects that I was trying to manage with the students on them, and it's a lot of juggling. And so I was like, I need to find another job. And so I went on the market and very casually because I didn't need to leave Georgia. So it took me a couple years because I only applied to things that I was really excited about. And one of the positions that came open was at UMass Dartmouth. And the position at UMass Dartmouth was in the School of Education, Public Policy, and Civic Engagement, which was a brand new college that had just been created. And the job was inside of a STEM education department that had just been created. And it was a really exciting opportunity to build a PhD program. And I thought that I had had enough experiences thinking through program development and other things in my various work at Georgia that this would be a really nice next step for me. And and so I came to Massachusetts, which is where I'm still sitting, um, and and helped found the math education PhD program, which grew into a STEM education PhD program. SEPC, the college, was dissolved and moved into the College of Arts and Sciences, and the STEM education program was merged with teacher preparation program, which is a really interesting thing because and I know that this happens in lots of places. Got a curriculum studies program that has, all the subject matter in together. So it's not unusual, but going from a STEM ed specific department to a generalist department was really insightful in thinking about how the people in the department approach education and how they approach content, and how the histories of where these departments came from really matters. And if you're in a program that is a more generalist program, you're building off of curriculum theories. You're building off of Dewey. You're building off of the people who created that huge foundation in early 20th century, 1920s, 19 teens. And if you're talking to people who are STEM educators, so science education, math education, to some extent computer science education, but they're a little bit different because they came along a little bit later. You're talking about people who came out of a tradition of science and math because those disciplines were really formed in response to Sputnik. It was the incredible amount of funding that was poured into the creation of those programs and the curricula and stuff that helps grow the academic programs that led to that. So the foundations of the departments are very different, and it's really interesting when you start seeing the ways that different disciplines interact with pedagogy and content and all of those kinds of things. But at any rate, I was at UMass Dartmouth for 13 years, 13 and a half years, and decided that it was time for me to move on. And I was given a very unique opportunity because I had been talking to somebody for a long time who runs a company called Eduscape, which is a teacher professional development company. And he kept telling me that he had a nonprofit. And I kept wondering to myself, and because he would just be like, oh, I started this nonprofit. And I'm like, okay. Um, And it finally clicked for me. And I emailed him and was like, wait, you have a nonprofit and I have grant writing skills. I think these two things go together. And that's how Rethink Learning Labs was started. So Rethink Learning was the nonprofit. Rethink Learning Labs is currently the only, we sort of think of it as a department. It's the only functioning arm of Rethink Learning. Um, And the whole purpose of the nonprofit is to transform education through research. So we do research, we apply research, We evaluate other programs that are research-based to try to actually move the needle on where things are going. So you're probably wondering, how does this go full circle? Well, every place I've been, I've had a technology um, aspect to it. But now, in addition to being a math educator, I'm doing more and more computer science education, which I find just really funny because I hated programming when I was an undergraduate. But here we are because everything goes full circle. So that's a quick overview of my academic journey. Um, to give you an idea of some things that some of the experiences I had that I would be happy to talk about. At the University of Georgia, as I mentioned, I was research faculty. I was not tenure track. I was affiliated with two departments. I was grant funded, had a large lab of students, and I left as an associate research scientist, which was, I probably would have been almost ready to go up for full research scientist, or I think they called it senior research scientist, but I didn't have quite enough years in yet to do that.
Meditation room is a good place to do that. Okay, okay.
Um, and then at UMass Dartmouth, I was regular tenure track faculty. I left as a full professor, so I went through all the ranks. I served as the department chair, which is it's an experience to be a department chair. It's very thankless. Um, I also served as the Rahini, I think you need to mute yourself.
Yeah, I'm trying to communicate with her to mute. Okay, that's done.
So
Sorry.
I was also the director of the Caput Center for Research and Innovation in STEM Education, which is a research center that is located on the UMass Dartmouth campus that was created in honor of the work that Jim Caput did. And he was a pivotal figure in bringing technology into math education and to some extent science education. And he's very well known for thinking about how to move mathematical ideas earlier. So he did a lot with early algebra and early calculus work. And SimCalc is one of the products that his team made that is sometimes still known. And I continued getting grants there. I've never stopped getting grants. I have always had lots of grants. And now I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. We function mostly as a small startup with a few twists because nonprofits have, as I learn every day, we have a lot of things that we have to attend to. There's a lot of restrictions and rules and regulations and stuff on nonprofits. I'm pursuing grant funding, but I have more ability to look at a diverse pool of grants because when you're faculty, you are limited in what grants you can apply for by the development office on your campus because they do not want you to conflict with their development efforts. And I do not have that anymore. And I'm a lot more able to work with schools and students because I don't teach. So I have a lot more flexibility to be able to go out and work with schools and students. So I was thinking about if nothing else, what do I want you to take away from this? And I think the number one thing took me a long time to understand, but it's so important, and that's don't let your job become your identity. Um, have hobbies, have friends, have activities, engage in other communities. Don't let your job become everything because then if things go wrong at your job, like you get rejected for a grant or somebody gets mad at you or you don't get a promotion or you don't get a position or whatever, it becomes very personal and it shouldn't be personal. It's your job. It's not you. You are separate from your job. You are a much more fulfilled and fulfilling person than your job. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how amazing you are. It doesn't matter what the people who you work with say to you. At the end of the day, it's a job, and if you leave it, they'll replace you. I I know that is you're probably thinking, wow, that's really rough, but it's true. I've left jobs and they replaced me, and it's fine. Um, But I am one of the people, I think a lot of people do let academic become their identity, and I think that that's just not healthy at all. Um, when you're looking for jobs, always look for the right fit, and remember that fit goes both ways. You need to fit what they need, and they need to fit what you need. I see, particularly graduate students, pursue any job that they can get. And I understand that because there's a reality that you need to pay your bills. I get that. But taking a job just to take a job is probably going to lead you right back onto the job market, unless you're just exceptionally lucky or you really just don't care that like this this is the box that my job lives in and this is the box the rest of me lives in, and those two things don't collide. I know people who can do that, and that is fantastic if you can do that. I can't do that. My life is more like this. And if your life is more like this, then you need to find the perfect fit, or not perfect fit, but a decent fit. Um, the biggest place I see this is I see people who either tell me that I'll tell you the two extremes. The people who are like, I hate writing. Can't tell you how many doctoral students I hear this from. And then they apply to all Research One universities. If you're applying to Research One universities, it means that you're going to be writing grants and papers until your fingers fall off. If you hate writing, you're going to hate that job. So don't do it. Go to a teaching university. It's fantastic to go to a teaching university. We need people to make the next generation of teachers. We need people to go, teach people how to be scientists. We go do that. Don't go to an R1 just because it's prestigious, because at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. At the other end, I see people who are like, I love research. Research is what gets me out of bed in the morning. And then I get requests for letters of recommendation from, South Iowa General University secondary branch. And I'm like, why are you applying to this place that is in the middle of nowhere? No offense to Iowa, but smack in the middle of the country, away from everything and everybody you know, and you're going to have a 4-4 teaching load. You're not going to have a minute to do research. Like, so think about that as you're looking. And like I said, I know that there's a reality that you need to pay the bills, but try hard to be a little bit picky. Um, I think it can go a long way. I learned that in Ohio because there were so many things that were right about Athens, Ohio. Athens, Ohio is an adorable little town. It's a cute little campus. It's a thriving college life. And it just didn't fit. And there was just nothing I could do to save that. And to this day, I feel bad about that because it's like it should have worked and it just didn't. Um, so to find the right fit. The next thing is every organization, I don't care where you work, has a pile of problems. So when you're thinking about leaving a place, always think I know this pile of problems. When I move to a new place, I'm going to get a different pile of problems. Do I hate this pile of problems so much that I want to risk whatever their pile of problems is? Because it doesn't matter where you go, there's always going to be things about working in that place that are difficult. I'll pick on Athens, Ohio again. Athens, Ohio is 70 miles, I think, from Columbus, and about 30, I think, miles from I want to say Parkersville or some Parkersburg, West Virginia. So if you want to go buy something, you have to drive to West Virginia to buy it. When I lived there, particularly, now they've got a Walmart. When I lived there, there was no Walmart. Um, that becomes a problem after a while. I mean, now it wouldn't be as much of a problem because Amazon will deliver anywhere, but in 1999, it was a problem. Um, and it's not certainly not what drove us away from Athens, but like it's something that I keep in mind. I love that right now I live less than 30 minutes away from a major airport. It's fantastic. I don't know if I would want to live in Athens, Georgia again. Athens, Georgia, it's an hour and a half of white knuckle driving to get to the airport. So it can be rough. So you pick the pile of problems that you want to deal with, but always remember, no matter where you go, there's going to be things you don't like about it. Um, Protect your physical and mental health. The Unfortunately, the university systems are still incredibly um, unwilling to step up and stop inappropriate behavior among faculty. Um, there are not good laws governing things like bullying and sexual harassment and those kinds of things. And if you are of a minority, there's a lot of sometimes there's a lot of that kind of thing going on. And at best, a faculty job will eat you alive because faculty job will expand to take every minute that you give it. Absolutely. There's always something else you can do if you're in a faculty position. But you have to push back and you have to say, this is the space where I work on me. This is the space that's my time. And when things are mentally unhealthy, you need to, get whatever help you need from that. Just know that that help is not always going to come from within your organization, no matter what they say. It's always worth trying the approved routes, but it may be that you end up having to talk to a social worker or somebody like that outside of the workplace because a lot of times the workplace is not going to step up and protect you. I think um, outside of universities, at least in the US, there is more that can be done to stop those kinds of things. Because, for example, I have at Rethink Learning Labs, we have a policy on harassment and bullying. And if somebody is harassing or bullying somebody, I can just plain fire them. I don't have to document for months. I don't have to put them through corrective activities. I don't have to do all of those kinds of things. I may choose to, but I can just fire them. And at a university, particularly if you're talking about tenured faculty or staff who are in a union, if you happen to be at a unionized campus, you can't just fire people. Um, so it's up to you. At the end of the day, you're the only person who's going to take care of you, and it doesn't matter what anybody else tells you. Because they will all tell you that they're your friend and they care about you and whatever. And I think at some level everybody means that, but at some level you're the only person who knows what you're living through. And yeah, take the time. While I was faculty, I became an ultra runner. First I was a half marathon runner, and then the last year or two that I was in faculty position, the last year or two that I ran ultras, um, which are very long. And that was the way that I took care of both my physical and mental health. I I was I was super happy doing that, and it was a super healthy way to deal with the kinds of stress that come along with any job that we have. I mean, I will tell you, as the executive director of a nonprofit, I do not feel any less stressed than I felt as a faculty member. I think again, in the US, I can't speak for outside the US, but in the US, I think the extreme of doing more with less has made it so that all of us just are sort of at the edge of what we can do all the time. Um, and I hope that goes away at some point, but I think that the culture that we have here is going to take a while. I know that that is not true everywhere because I know people who have worked in other countries, and the culture of working and working and working is not, it's not everywhere. Um, and the fifth thing is grants. Um, so when I was faculty, people would always tell me how lucky I was that I had grants and how great it was because I always had students to help me and all this other stuff. But I will tell you, grants also are a lot of work. Managing students is a lot of work. Mentoring students is a lot of work. Um, but grants also mean a certain amount of freedom. They mean freedom in two ways. One is if you work at a university, and I think some nonprofits do this as well, they will let the principal investigator have a portion of the indirect costs back. which means that you get a little pot of money that you can use to further your research in whatever ways you see fit. I was able to travel internationally on that. I was able to help my students go to conferences with that. It left me with some freedom in the money that I spent. It also leaves freedom in that it keeps people off your back. So instead of walking around with a target on your back that you're going to help with this, that, or the other thing, particularly from not so much from your peers are still going to want you to do everything because everybody feels, stretched thin. But from the people who are up higher, the provost level, sometimes the dean level, they will give you of a little bit of grace if you're bringing that money in because they're also benefiting financially from you bringing that money in. So grants are work, but they're also a little bit of freedom. And so I think trying to be self-funded is very, very hard, but keeping a line of research going where you're pretty regularly bringing in grants can bring it so that you have some freedoms that you otherwise wouldn't have. So I think that's worth doing. And then my last slide, if you would like to contact me, I'm always happy to receive an email. I am sometimes slow to reply because I'm always doing a lot of things, but I usually eventually will cycle back around. If I don't cycle back around in a reasonable amount of time, just email me again and say, hey, I think this got lost in your email, and then I'll email you back. Never be afraid to gently nudge somebody who doesn't reply back to you. It just means that they're busy. So that is my longer than I intended, but quick introduction to myself. I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully people will have questions. Hopefully I've raised some areas of interest for you to ask questions about.
Thank you for your candid and practical advice. You say things that some people are afraid to even mention. I really appreciate that about you. So I'm going to open it up for folks in here to ask questions. And thank you for just giving your contact so that folks here can reach out to you.
Of
We
course.
really appreciate your willingness to support graduate students.
And if you ever become rich and famous, please remember Rethink Learning Labs in your giving.
Definitely, definitely. I will. I'm not speaking for others. I'm speaking for myself because like we've had a longer relationship. Yeah. So and I appreciate that lots of stuff that I learned from you personally. I am grateful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to open the floor, not just for me, but others to ask before.
Lauren?
Yeah,
Yeah,
can
go.
you hear me? I've got new headphones and I don't know if they have the microphone thing.
Yes.
You're coming
Okay.
through loud and clear.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really insightful to kind of see that you've taken this bit of a winding journey. And as someone who is thinking about what is the first step of my winding journey going to look like, I appreciate your candor. I have kind of two things. The first thing is if you could touch on you said that you left UGA because you felt like you were on a treadmill, and then you went to a tenured track position from the research position. Can you describe what the differences between those two things are? Because in my mind, I very much view them as the same thing, and I'm not really sure how being a tenured professor is not like being on a treadmill, but a research position is. And then the other thing something that I'm a little bit fearful of because I've had other jobs before this is what I don't want in a career is really important to me. And sitting behind a computer desk for 40 hours a week is just not something that I'm interested in. I really want to be in contact with teachers and things, but I still don't, in my mind, I viewed tenure track or like academic position as the only way to do that. So I was hoping that you could comment a little bit on what you do in your current role and if you sit behind a computer desk all day or how I can kind of avoid that, but doing something that might potentially be outside of the academic realm.
Yeah, so I can see why faculty position would look like being on a treadmill, and there are aspects of it that definitely are. The difference is when you're research faculty, you are responsible for bringing in substantially your whole salary plus the salaries of all the people who work for you. So as soon as you get $1 million grant, the next thing you have to do is get $1 million grant. And then you need another $1 million grant, you need another $1 million grant. And I don't mean like when one ends, you get another one. I mean like the very next call, you're putting it out again. As faculty, you have the freedom to do those sequentially instead of on top of each other. So you could get $1 million grant, you could do that grant, and then you could pursue additional funding. So that's one difference. The other big difference, I mean, the easiest difference to spot is as research faculty, there's not an expectation that you're going to teach, and you're protected from a lot of the service. At least at UGA, different faculty do different things, different universities do different things. So I think that is definitely a huge difference. And like I said, I do identify as a researcher first. So that was fine with me. I did teach while I was at UGA. I taught a couple different courses. I did sit on dissertations. I did chair dissertations, just not nearly as much as I did as faculty at UMass Dartmouth. But I think that's, being faculty is a lot of like, I need to write papers, I need to present my work, I need to get grants, so there's that aspect, but it doesn't have the same, like, if you're on a tenure track, particularly once you're tenured, but if you're on a tenure track and you don't have a grant, you're not going to lose your job that year. You may lose your student, which is not great, but you're not going to lose your job. And if you're research faculty and you don't bring in a grant, you could lose your job, depending upon the organization you work for and if they've got other funding and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was the treadmill I felt like I was on. It was like I didn't even get to enjoy that I had this $1 million grant. I needed to write another one. And it didn't strike me until I had that first $1 million grant that was the trajectory I was on. Because I was like, oh, I'll get $1 million grant and that'll be so great. And I got $1 million grant and I was like, oh, now I need to go get another one. So, and then what I do now. So what I do now, like I said, we run a lot like a startup because we are still very small and very new. And I think that what we do day to day will change over time. But right now we are funded almost exclusively by NSF. Um, we are working on diversifying that for all the reasons that are good and all the reasons that are bad that we need to diversify from that. So I spend a lot of my time behind a computer for sure, but I also make sure that we're doing projects that are in the schools. I mean, part of this is how you write your projects. If you're writing projects to be in the schools and doing things, you can do that. So like last spring, we spent 7 weeks, 2 hours a week, I think it was around 2 hours a week, at the Boys and Girls Club doing robots with them. And in December, we spent, I'm trying to think, it was about 10 hours a week for 3 weeks doing robots with a local private school. And the week before, no, last week, the week before last, I'm sorry, we had a huge blizzard this week and it's like time has just stood still. I'm sure you've heard about it on the news. We had 41 inches of snow. It was crazy. It's still crazy. Um, but the week before last, we were in a third grade for the better part of 2 days, working with the third graders on how to place fractions on number lines, which uncovers all kinds of problems that kids have with fractions. And it was super interesting to get to spend the time with them. And then this week we were supposed to go in, but haven't yet because of the blizzard, and work with their parents so that their parents can better help them with fractions. And these are things that I don't think I would be able to do as faculty. Like, as faculty, because of your teaching load, because of other things, you can't just say, okay, for the next month and a half, I'm going to spend every Wednesday afternoon at the Boys and Girls Club. Because it turns out Wednesday afternoon is when you're teaching, or Wednesday afternoon is when you're expected to be doing this other thing. So I think, but I do know people who work in schools that have really, or universities that have really close partnerships with schools who are out in schools all the time. One of my former students, Drew Polly, is in North Carolina, and I haven't asked him, but I would bet he spends as many hours in the schools with kids as he spends in his own office. So I think for my job though, I think it just, well, my job, I should be behind a computer most of the time. I'm the executive director. We will get there. But the people who work with me, I think we will hit a point where they will be sort of driving how much they're out in the field and how much they're not. And hopefully we'll hit a point where I'm begging to go out in the field because I want to get out from behind the computer.
And just a quick follow-up, are you writing research on all of these things as well? Or is there someone on your team that's writing the research up on the things that you're talking about? So you're actually publishing still?
We're doing, my teams are publishing. Um, I'm publishing because I'm on the papers, but I'm further down the author list. But that's how it's been for a long time. Because when I was department chair, the same thing happened. Because I just didn't have the time to lead the research. But yeah, we're still publishing. We don't write about everything we do because everything we do is IRB approved. Like the work with the third graders, we didn't get IRB approval for that. So we won't be writing about that except in like our annual report and things like that. But our NSF grants are IRB approved, and we're writing papers and presenting at the same conferences and all of that we were doing before. And I think if you look at the big organizations that do work similar to us, so you think Turk and EDC and Digital Promise and SRI, those people are doing the same things. They're behind their desk a lot, but it's all project-based work. And so it's the nature of the projects that they get funded drives how much they're out in the field and how much they're not out in the field. The other thing would be to look at jobs that have a big professional development component in them. Because that would put you with teachers a lot of the time. And I've thought about that, particularly because our sister company is a professional development company, but I think I would miss the research too much. So I go back to I self-identify as a researcher.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
We still have time for for a couple of questions.
Hi, Dr.
Rachel,
Oral. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
hi.
I'm fine. How are you, Rahini?
I'm good too. Thank you so much for that amazing talk. Although I've just like Colin said, I've had the privilege and the honor and experience of having these talks and kind of picking your brain throughout these years, but kind of having to see that also at this point of view, it was very helpful to me. I guess my question is more generic and broadfold, considering the stage of life I am in. I feel like I will be entering the workforce very soon. So I guess my question would be when students are transitioning into, from education to the professional world, what do you think as, being part of faculty, now you're leading the nonprofit organization, and also your own personal experiences of being like a student and then research scientist. What do you think would be some of the most important things to prioritize, perhaps, for us students? I feel like sometimes I'm all scrambled. I want to write a lot of papers and I'm also working on a proposal, but at the same time, I feel like I am not doing anything good and who is going to hire me? So I just don't know if everybody's going through the same anxiety, but I kind of feel that. So I don't know if that's helpful. What do you think, as somebody with a lot of experience, could, us students use?
Yeah, um, I think a few things. One is to get experiences beyond your coursework. I think that's really important. And if you have an assistantship that can help, it depends upon what you do with your assistantship. But I think doing things that are outside of that are really good. Like I know Rahini has volunteered with us before. She's going to start volunteering with us again Us being another researcher and before it was when I was still at UMass Dartmouth. Um, so I think that's one of the things is to do things beyond the coursework. I think another thing is to develop your ability to set up time so that it works. People tell me all the time that they're amazed at how productive I am. And let me tell you, I never feel like I'm very productive. But I think it's just a matter of setting up systems so that you get things done. Um, and I will tell you that it's a lot easier to get things done when you have external deadlines put on you than when you have no deadlines. So, for example, if you look at my Vita, I have about 1 million, that's an exaggeration, obviously, conference presentations and published proceedings, and I have far less um, journal articles. That's absolutely because of the imposed external deadline. If journal articles came with imposed deadlines, I would get lots more journal articles written. I get lots of grant proposals written because there's deadlines. So finding a way to convince yourself of those deadlines is, I think, really important, and setting deadlines for yourself. And then just get used to feeling like you have 1 million things to do and know that they're never going to get all done. You're going to drop some balls, like you're juggling, and you're going to keep most of the balls in the air, but sometimes the balls are going to fall down, and just try to make it so that those balls are the ones that are okay to drop. So the things that are the least important to you, the things that don't leave other people in a lurch, the things, you need to prioritize for yourself. But the I think as an academic, whether you go into nonprofit or stay in academia, I'm guessing if there's, other kinds of research jobs, it's the same thing. You're just asked to do a lot of different kinds of work. And so it's always going to feel a bit like a juggling act. So kind of make peace with that.
Thank you so much. That is huge. I was just writing some of the points as you were saying. Yeah, I'm gonna blow this up into like a big presentation and keep it on top of my bed so I can see that and kind of just streamline my entire life. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yep.
And thank you, Rohini and Lauren, for asking, because I know when we ask questions here, we're not asking just for us, but for other folk who will watch the video after NARST posted. So we appreciate. I'm not sure whether we still have like 3 minutes, Rachel or Khadija or I think is it Adara, whether you have questions to ask Dr. Aura.
No, I don't have a question. I enjoyed the 2 questions and I've learned from that. And thank you so much for the detailed response. I'm actually writing my points down to like I need to do things outside my THA and also to actually write deadlines to myself. That's important. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. If there is no further question, if there's no question lingering, we are 2 minutes to the top of the hour. I want to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Earl for making time for us, despite your schedule has like lots of things and deadlines. I really appreciate that you give time to support graduate students who have questions and are coming up. We really appreciate your willingness to help others.
Oh, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're gonna stop here. I want to honor everyone's time, and thank you all for joining us, making time to join us as well, and Rohini and Laura for asking those questions that will also benefit others. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.